Hi, Joe. So thanks for joining me as my podcast guest. I know I joined your live before, and I know you're also a very big fan of podcasts since you actually host one yourself. Just to help the audience to know a little bit more about you, why don't you share a bit with us about your role as the CEO of Esco Media and what's your podcast about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wear a couple different hats, one of which, as you mentioned, is the CEO of Esco Media. And essentially what we're doing there is working with B2B brands to help them accelerate pipeline and improve their conversions through content and social. I also host the B2B Marketing Asia podcast. So we interview leaders across the region to get their insights on what they're doing. And then my third hat, which I wear, is I'm a lecturer professor at Esco Business School, which is one of the top ranked business schools in the world.
Having working into B2B marketing space for the last 5-10 years, what are some of the major trends you are seeing then as a B2B marketer in this space? I don't know, globally, regionally, in APAC, what are some of the stuff that you're seeing?
Yeah, one interesting phenomenon, and I think this is nothing new to all the B2B listeners listening, is the shift from mass marketing to more specific. So you think of account-based marketing, ABM has gotten really popular, particularly in the past few years. It's already been very well mature in terms of the US, Australia, but now it's getting more and more popular in APAC. So I personally love the ABM approach because my approach to building businesses is very one-on-one or one to few anyways. I tend to work with a lot of enterprise accounts. So for us, it works out very well. But I really think it depends on your organization, how you structure it from your per ticket price. So for example, if your per ticket price is over 100K, then the ABM strategy makes perfect sense. If you're a SaaS company and you have a product which is about maybe $1,000 a month, then that strategy may not make sense. You may focus on other things like inbound marketing and potentially performance marketing. And that's not to say you can't do ABM with other parts of performance and inbound, but I think the way you structured is a little bit different because you're focusing on a very specific target list of accounts. And that's what we're doing with a lot of our clients right now, is helping them connect with decision makers at very specific accounts that they've outlined for that specific quarter. So that's exciting.
Okay, now it's getting interesting. Okay, and now it's getting interesting because you talk about ABM. ABM has been a buzzword for a while now. A lot of companies, they think they should do it, and a lot of companies thinks differently what ABM is. A lot of companies, they think ABM is just taking a list of company names. Okay, these are the companies that I want. Let's go upload them on LinkedIn and target them. That's what they call ABM. So what is ABM in your mind? What is the ABM strategy?
It's a tough one. I think we've talked about this in my podcast as well. There's different strategies within ABM. So there's one to many, which for me is still digital marketing. There's one to few. So going after a specific basket of accounts at a certain time, or one-to-one. So there's even within ABM, there's different strategies underneath it. But once again, I would say that ABM works with different strategies. So for example, we talked about uploading the list into LinkedIn, perhaps running ads that way. You could focus on the traditional things like once you've focused on who are your key accounts that you want to close that quarter, can you invite them to specific roundtables or specific private events? So there's a bunch of different strategies that you can implement. But I would say that it's nothing new that a lot of marketers haven't thought about or done before. It's just being a little bit more focused in terms of your messaging, in terms of the accounts that you're going after. And I think a lot of B2B tech companies we work with are now going after the ABM approach.
Okay, dig a little bit deeper. Like when you're working on your own, like for your own company, and when you're working with your clients in terms of developing an ABM strategy. So what's the first thing? What's the first step? Let's say in the first meeting, the client tell you, I want to run an ABM strategy. And then as a consultant, as an agency, what's the first thing that you do with them?
Yeah, so
steps.
I would share both because our approach versus our client's approach tends to differ. And my approach is very different. I don't think I've heard anyone do it. For me, I'm not necessarily interested in the company. Yes, it has to have a certain size because we generally work within different departments and different geographies. But for me, it's more focusing on the people. So is this someone that I'm actually going to enjoy working with? And the reason I focus on people versus organizations is that I've been fortunate that some of our clients, they leave. So if you look at the average tenure of a marketer, it's going to be 2 to 3 years max. So they're jumping to new companies. What happens when you have a solely company-specific approach is you tend to lose that account. Whereas we've been very fortunate that our clients have left, they've joined new companies, they've brought us on board. And for me, that is far more exciting because I like working with them, regardless of what company that they're working with. And so that's the fun part. With that said, that's not the way most companies do it, not the way our clients do it, which once again, no wrong or right. But I would say that they have a specific companies in mind. So what they'll do is generally work with a sales team to identify, okay, who are the top, say 50 to 100 companies we're trying to close this quarter, for example. And then I would work with them and say, okay, give me that list and then break it down a little bit more for me because company is great, but what kind of seniority or what kind of persona are you trying to target? What kind of geographies are you looking after? Any specific industries outside that are complementary? So for the first step is really gathering as much information as possible to understand what they're actually looking to do and who they're looking to do it with. So that's the primary KPI or objective early on.
Okay, so first thing is gather information, right? Okay. And I like the way that you mentioned your approach. So your approach is like ABM, but it's to the people side of things. It's like relationship building to an extent that no matter that guy or that girl, he or she, no matter where he goes, he or she is still going to be your client for the long term. And then that's your approach, your ABM approach. And then when it comes to your client's ABM approach, your first step is to gather as much information at the start. Okay, let's say company, firmographics, and then what's next? Because I think one thing that I'm very interested in, or a lot of companies, a lot of people be very interested in, is how do you justify that your ABM approach is doing good, is generating an impact? Because when it comes to ABM, usually people want to target big companies, big enterprise companies, right? It's not like marketing can right away showcase, okay, they read this piece of content, they come in as a demo. It doesn't work like that, right? For if it's ABM or big enterprises like that. Okay, so once you identify the company, what's next? Is it defining goals, aligning teams?
Just next to aligning teams, and this is a realization that I learned on a recent project, is we should ideally be meeting with both the head of marketing as well as the head of sales. Because when you have that gap there, that's when issues happen. And when you speak with the sales team, they're very clear in terms of who they're targeting and who they want to outreach to. So it really helps to make sure that both are on the same page, marketing and sales, as well as us, because we're helping to bridge the gap between the two. We generally have meetings with both marketing and sales to better understand what are their personal goals and how we can work together. Because marketing may be doing something already with that person, sales may be doing something already, but our job is to find out what's been done thus far. How do we bridge the gap? What are some new ideas that we can include? Or even if it's not new ideas, how can we optimize their existing things? So I'm a big believer of not, just throwing new things just for the sake of throwing new things out there, but working with them to audit or take a look at their existing activities and say, okay, here's what we've done. Here's the outcome. How can we make this better? So we do that with a lot of clients as well, rather than jumping to new things. For others, they want to move on to newer things. So we'd look at, okay, what is the best way in which to reach them? And so we're doing a couple of pilots right now with some very large tech companies that will launch hopefully in the next month or so. And for that, we are launching what I call like branded podcast series. So I'm hosting the series and we're bringing together the company. So it could be their head of marketing, their head of sales, and we're bringing together the prospect company. And we're having a kind of private dialogue or conversation to find out more about the prospect company and the person behind it. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the goals they're looking to achieve? And also give them opportunity to share their expertise, because it shouldn't just be a discovery for the seller. It should also give the client, the potential client, the opportunity to share their expertise, give them a platform to build their thought leadership. I don't like that word, but it's essentially that. And I think it's about finding out what works and what's going to benefit both parties.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about this like podcast project that you're working on. So does it mean that you're helping the clients to create their own podcast?
So right now it's a series. So we've signed off for several episodes for each company. And yes, we're managing end to end, from working with them on identifying the list, identifying the prospect accounts, to hosting the session. So I'm the host, as well as post-production. Some of the post-production we're doing ourselves, some we're working with a partner that the client works with previously. So that's how we're doing it end-to-end approach.
Interesting. But on one end, on one challenge that I might have is, let's say I personally I do have some clients that they want to run thought leadership campaign as well. But then the thing is that they needed a host who also needs to, because they are in a very niche industry, is like warehouse robotics. So I think one challenge that they would have is like having someone who is also expert enough as a host to interview another experts who is also in that field. So I think, do you face that challenge as well, like within your target audience group?
Yes, I'm cheating in a way because we work with a lot of MarTech companies. So with MarTech, they're selling to our other marketing and salespeople. So I understand the space very well. I understand what are the right questions to ask. But I think, yes, to your point, I have seen other industries do this. So those who focus on, for example, IT or manufacturing, having someone that comes from that background who can ask the right questions can definitely help. There's two different ways of going about it. If you have the host or the expert internally, and this is a challenge for a lot of organizations where they may have an expert, but they don't really do very well on camera. And so you have someone who's talking through very technical, knows what they're talking about, but it's very difficult to watch. And I've had some clients try to do it internally, really struggle with that. So I guess the first recommendation I would give for them is, okay, how do you elevate some of the communication skills of that expert so that you can do it in-house? Alternatively, what you can do is work with a third party or an influencer. Once again, not really a big fan of that word, but an influencer who is very well known in that space, who gets it, and work with them. So two different approaches, no wrong or right, depending on what resources they have in-house currently.
And talking about like the podcast stuff that you're doing with companies that you're interviewing, the accounts or the person that they want to go after. So when you are working with the head of marketing, when you guys are finalizing the proposal to ask for, okay, to get approval in terms of doing this, did you have any challenges or pushback from like sales, from, I don't know, the management team saying, asking you, oh, how is this going to bring us sales? How is this going to bring more revenue into these accounts that we're targeting?
So funny enough, this idea that we had of launching this series was not mine. My clients actually brought it to me and said, can you do it? And I said, okay, sure. So they were already pre-sold by the time they got to me. They just said, okay, here's our budget. Here's what we're looking to do. Can you do it? Yes or no? And so, of course, I said yes, and we've implemented it very successfully. But back to your question, no, we haven't gotten any pushback, knock on wood, yet, because at the end of the day, sales more than anyone sees the value out of it. Because, for example, let's say that you're trying to reach a particular stakeholder. Let's say it's telecoms. We'll just say Singtel, for example. Let's say you're trying to reach the head of marketing at Singtel, and they're ghosting you. They're not responding to your LinkedIn messages. They haven't responded to your email invites, and you've gotten very frustrated. You say, okay, how do I build a relationship with that person? So that's where we've stepped in and say, okay, we know that person. We're happy to facilitate a conversation between both parties. And so if you think about it from the sales point of view, it's like, yeah, okay, sure. The marketing is managing it. I'll have to step in for the conversation. And yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. So to your point, no, we haven't got any pushback on it yet. I think the caveat is the budget, because it is mostly an enterprise thing we're working with, making sure that we're working on a different series. So we don't promise like one-offs, because it's very difficult to get any results of a one-off. But if you have, say, 5 to 10 episodes lined up that you've already have the marketing communications you can build off the back of that. So for example, we're doing very much this format, video conversations. We'll take that and we'll break it up into bite-sized pieces for social, for the newsletter, for landing pages, and so on. So it really benefits both marketing and sales when you think about it that way.
Okay. I like the way like you mentioned results, right? And I like the way you break. First of all, I just like the way that you're saying that you're turning this not only into an ABM strategy, but you're turning it into a content ABM plus sort of content strategy, because you can use it, you can leverage it to do so much on it. So the impact of it is more than just what you get for the dollar, right? You can actually save a lot of time and effort thinking about what to write.
Absolutely. And this is one thing that we are known for, is combining content plus ABM. Because to your point, yes, we could have just done it private event, closed it there, which most folks do. But we're saying, okay, as someone who does a lot of content, how can we get more bang for our buck? And also it extremely benefits the client as well, too, that we've seen for our own organization, is that when we're posting, let's say going back to the Singtel example, let's say we've done an interview with Singtel. Then you better bet that the head of marketing at M1, the head of marketing at Circle's Life is going to watch it, because they're always trying to figure out what the peers are up to. So you're by default getting exposure to so many different similar prospect companies by releasing that content in a smart way. But yes, that's something that we're adding on to the additional results factor.
And it's sort of like a case study. You see your competitors is using your product, and then they're using that. Okay, let me check it out. And then just maybe, and then next time when you pitch to another company that's a similar Singtel, you say, we just did a podcast, we just did an interview with Singtel. Here it is. Do you want to join as well? It's like, what are they doing? I want to be on this thing.
Exactly. There's a psychological factor. We talk about it in my business school class in terms of mirroring. So for example, they'll want to know, okay, if you ask them on the series, who else have you done? So for example, let's say we've done the head of OCBC, and now we're looking at to do the head of DBS, for example. It's very easy to have that conversation because they can say, okay, here's what OCBC has done. Obviously, we're going to have a different interview or a different angle for you, but at least you can see what your peers are doing. And so that helps reduce the apprehension, because they, okay, if OCBC done it, then sure, we might as well do it too. Or why aren't we doing it? So there's so many different psychological factors that come into play once you have that additional, that original interviews shot and promoted.
Yeah, and those guys are rejecting your email or rejecting your request and stuff because they don't want to be. And then if you open up as a conversation with them on their expertise, okay, they might be more willing to accept it. Okay, but okay, how do you measure it? Because you were saying about you need to launch a series of them to get results. What sort of results or impact do you align with the clients? Because this is something very hard to measure, right?
It is a bit challenging. I think we have to have both marketing and sales KPIs. The holy grail is that they close all of the accounts within 3 to 6 months. That's the ideal situation. Realistically, even in sales, the best salespeople aren't able to close at that rate. But if you give a look at the amount of investment versus the ticket size, if we're able to close even one of these accounts, it's huge ROI on the back end of that. And then as we talked about, that's on the sales side. And then on the marketing side, we talk about the drastic improvement in terms of reach, in terms of engagement, in terms of potential leads, if you are marketing these assets correctly. So there's marketing KPIs and sales KPIs on both sides. The holy grail is you're closing some of these, but I think that's why we do a series, such that even if we close one of these deals, which we more than likely will, it's going to be massive ROI for the company. And it's something that can be scalable and repeatable too. Yeah, that's what they're ideally looking for.
Okay, so on one end, the sales KPI is like if you close one of them, but that's you won't know until 36 months down the road. Though. So you're like using those marketing matrix, the stuff that you can actually measure within each episode as how is it indicators or signals to tell both client and yourself, you guys are on the positive route to success.
Yes, exactly.
Is that right? That's very interesting because this is actually the first time I hear like using podcasts or interview as an ABM strategy, because a lot of the time back then, ABM strategy, what they did is just like very mass marketing. They like a lot of companies, they still take ABM marketing as an approach that they just upload a bunch of lists. They just basically find a list, upload it, target them, and that's ABM.
Yeah, it could be one tactic, but I don't think that as a standalone tactic is going to be super effective. You have to marry it with different tactics and approaches, and I think that's what we're trying to do as well with our approach.
Okay, Joe. Thanks for it. I know you need to run within a few minutes, so like I think I got a lot out of you. But before we end, I just want to play a little game with you. So what I'm going to do right now, basically, I will shout out a lot of like objects or items, right? So I want you to answer me right away, like a rapid fire questions. You need to answer me right away. The first brand or company that comes into your mind when I fire out like these sort of like objects or items that I list out. Okay, are you ready?
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
Shoes, Nike.
TV.
Sony.
Drinks.
Dasani. Water. CRM. I gotta go with Marketo. SEO. Ahrefs.
Email.
Gotta go with Marketo.
Okay. Project management.
Project management. Trello.
Analytics software.
Google.
Okay. Interesting, because I like some of your answers. Because for shoes, I definitely chose Nike as well.
Yeah.
And I guess that TV, a lot of people would choose Sony.
They do
And
the best. Yeah.
yeah, and it's interesting to see what sort of brands like comes into people's mind when I shout out like these different items, because some of my list is actually very similar to your list as well.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to hear that.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much for you. So if people want to find you and contact you, where should they, I don't know, find you? Where can they identify you?
Yeah, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm always hiding out there. So if you type in Joe Escobedo or just type in B2B brand builder, you'll find me that way too. Whichever is easier, just connect. Let me know that you heard about me through this podcast, and I'm happy to get in touch.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you for your time. Thanks for your sharing about ABM. That was very interesting. I'm sure like the audience will love it.
Yeah, my pleasure.